Looks like the audio's good. All right. And we are live.
And I am actually recording.
You're listening to the Verhoeven Effect podcast. We have another very special episode where we watch a movie. We are watching The Andromeda Strain in 1971's, directed by Robert Wise. You might know he's directed things like The Day the Earth Stood Still, West Side Story, The Sound of Music.
Yep.
Star Trek the Motion Picture.
Star Trek the best picture. No.
Have you
most visually interesting, but yeah.
There's like some supercut on Paramount Plus right now. I think it's the only place you've seen it. Have you seen that yet?
No, but I'm going to. It's like 5.5 hours long.
I don't know.
Clock staring into space.
Say it did a lot of movies.
Oh,
I would not expect The Sound of Music to be in his catalog, but
it's kind of like what's it, George Miller, like the director of The Road Warrior and Happy Feet
and Babe, Pig in the City.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of an eclectic mix of well, I don't know. This isn't so far removed from his earlier.
Well, you think of like The Day the Earth Stood Still. Like I could see like the Andromeda Strain, those kind of line up.
Yeah,
but but musicals I wouldn't necessarily expect in his catalog.
But he always liked interesting visual stuff.
Yeah,
like even in his musicals, there was like an interesting way of shooting those, and But yeah. Oh, by the way, I'm Nathan.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I'm Colin if I didn't introduce it. This was released in March 12th, 1971. A quick shot of movies from 1971. We got A Clockwork Orange.
Yep.
We got THX 1138. We got Steven Spielberg's Duel.
Oh yeah, okay.
We got The French Connection. What else? We got Dirty Harry. Bunches. Oh, Clute. I always heard of Clute. I've never seen it.
But the one with the dog?
I don't know. Oh, Planet of the Apes. That was.
Oh yeah. Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, banner year for sci-fi.
Yeah, it was a good year.
I also think the Omega Man came out this year, so that's two. What's that guy's movies?
Charlton Heston.
Yeah, two Charlton Heston movies, huh? So this was written by Nelson Gidding, but based on a novel by Michael Crichton. I watched it behind the scenes, and it was kind of fun because Robert Wise is like, yeah, you don't hire the novelist to write the screenplay because they're too like emotionally connected to the material.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Although they did seem like they didn't kick Michael Crichton out. They allowed him to do a bunch of stuff on the show. They just weren't necessarily letting him write the screenplay. But
he was an extra in one of the background guys.
Yeah. Let's put this 6'9" guy in some scrubs.
Yeah.
Which, I guess Robert Wise made sure he didn't get cut out of the movie, so that's why he put him in that scene, because like that scene would never be cut out of the movie.
Yeah, just find the one.
Yeah, and he was a doctor, or med student, or whatever, however that works.
Well, it was funny because I've heard because I've read the book.
Yeah,
and I'll to be honest with you, this is one of my favorite movies, so I didn't want to spoil that, but. This is a movie I really like a lot, and I will always watch with rapt fascination because I'm not a guy who hates exposition and long explanations and stories if they're cool and relevant to the story. So I always like this movie a lot. I kind of, and the movie's very faithful to the book. There's a few changes, but not much.
Yeah.
But the book contained footnotes, because this was shot. The movie, it comes across as a documentary style kind of, and there's also a hearing going on in the background. Go
ahead. There's a fun thing, which I guess so. You know how like he talks about the Andromeda Strain in the book and how it has like a bibliography in the back. So that's all garbage.
Yes. But it was written as if it was like a factual document.
So that's what Gidding took from the book. Is like, oh, we can do that too. So the thing up front is like, we were working with a scoop program to do an accurate portrayal. It's like, that's all fake too.
Yeah, it's all just made up, which is fine.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when
If
you
you're
have
in on
like
it.
the amount of detail they have in this book, and like they explain methodology, is what usually people get wrong with movies like this. Investigation is like, you really have to explain and go in depth with the methodology. You can't just like, oh, we're just doing this thing, because.
Yeah,
And because they have such a methodology, you just believe everything they tell you.
yeah, it's you're drawn into the fiction, which I think is great.
Yeah.
That's what I like about this. I don't.
And also what I like about, because the book came out in like 69 and it doesn't read as if it's like an old book.
No.
Because like the technology is just kind of laid out there. It's not like horror. It's not like detailed or described. It's just like, this technology exists, and you kind of like, and then when you read it from nowadays, you just kind of imagine it as the tech, like, oh yeah, it existed. It was probably just, you imagine it's being smaller than what it actually was back then, if it existed. So
Yeah. Yeah, another thing about this movie, besides the story and kind of like, oh, it's the science. These guys are actually using the scientific method. No one's hysterical, even though there's moments of tension.
yeah,
And everyone's just not running around like their hair's on fire. And also, like, the look of this movie is great. And the special effects guy for this movie, Douglas Trumbull, he worked on 2001, and that's
which
where you
is,
see a lot of cues.
yeah. Well, even though I don't think it's the same like production designer. Like a lot of the sets look like they're from 2001, but it's just like a happenstance that guy also did the effects for 2001. So
Well, this guy almost bankrupted himself on this movie. He
yeah,
wanted to be a part of it, and he underbid what he was willing to get paid versus the kind of special effects they wanted. But later, he emerged to be like a famous, special effects set
yeah,
guy.
he, yeah. He worked on tons of stuff. He
Just died recently too.
Yeah, he died in February this year.
Yeah.
He directed Silent Running, which is kind of a cult movie, but like once you see it, it's like, oh yeah, that movie.
Yeah,
that
it's a
that
cool
was on.
movie.
Yeah. He did the effects for Star Trek: The Motion Picture, which he took over for somebody else, and they did all the effects in 6 months with like a team of 3 people.
Yep. Get some coffee, guys. We're not sleeping for 3 months.
He worked on Blade Runner initially, but somebody else took over from him. But I didn't.
Yeah.
So I think he's still essential to what Blade Runner looks like, but he didn't finish it. But so what for that means, yeah, just a lot of famous stuff. Yeah, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. So
Yep.
But yeah, it seemed like Hollywood didn't really treat him great, even though he was like pretty revolutionary in the stuff he did.
Yeah.
Although he has like a late credit for like the Tree of Life, because apparently, who's that guy? Thin Blue Line or Thin Red Line. Terrence Malick, is that it?
Yeah. Terrence Malick.
Yeah, I think that's who directed. And he talked to him. Is like, I really don't like how CGI looks. Like, it's like, what can I do about it? And Trumbull was like, well, you have all these like cool programs now where you can basically just shoot whatever you want and composite it together without really looking like CGI. So that's what he did. Because that's like really what he's good at, where he's just like, I mean, that's why Blade Runner is considered like an in-camera effects movie. It wasn't like done outside of it. It wasn't like blue screen. It was just like rolling the film back and re-recording stuff on top, so it layered on top of each other, which that's what Trumbull did really good. Which he has like, there's an effect in this movie, and he describes it where they have like a 3D diagram of the base or the underground facility, and he describes how he shot it, and it sounds so simple, but I can't, when I see the effect, I can't imagine, because he said all he did was like, he took white cardboard, he drew the schematic of the base out, just one level, and then he basically just moved the camera down, and as they re-exposed it, it like changed the color of the previous ones, and he's just spinning the cardboard in a circle.
Yeah.
And it looks like a 3D. It looks like a computerized 3D model of the base. It's very wild.
In terms of looks, this is a late 60s, early 70s production. Very much like 2001. It seems futuristic. I mean, some of the effects are they're cool because oh, this is from the Andromeda strain, but they were like, oh, we built this secret underground germ research lab, and we have 50-foot TV screens that project anything we want on them. It's like that stuff did no way existed back then, but it looks believable in that
Yeah.
world,
Uh-huh.
which is what's cool about this movie.
Oh, I mean, yeah,
like,
I mean the base is basically like their spaceship, and this is kind of like like an episode of Star Trek almost. But
yeah.
um,
But every level's a different color, and it's a really cool looking movie. As a matter of fact, all those levels, there was only one set level built. They just repeated it as they went along. But
it stars James Olsen, Arthur Hill, and David Wayne. Do you know any of these people, Nathan?
they're character actors. I recognize some of them from the Twilight. They're 60s character actors. Some of them did Twilight Zone. Some of them did other things.
Yeah, I saw like almost every of them were like did something on Perry Mason or was on Murder, She Wrote.
Yeah, these are essentially like TV character actors that Robert Wise wanted because he wanted the material to be the movie, not the actors.
Yeah.
So these are the people you get, but they all did a good job acting.
Oh, yeah.
Because one of the things I think that's great about this movie is you had like 4 distinct personalities, and each one of them served a role. None of them was overly aggressive, not aggressive enough, made really stupid decisions. No, they all seem that they have a role to fill. Now, there was a lot of contrived things with that happened.
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's the worst possible time that could happen, but it's a movie. So,
yeah. So what's your history at this movie, Nathan?
I just used to watch. This was my entree to. This is my favorite Michael Crichton movie. I know everyone's going to say, "What about Jurassic Park?" It's like, well, that was a great Steven Spielberg movie with a Michael Crichton like subframe. This is purely how this guy thinks. This was my introduction to Michael Crichton. That's why I read all his books.
Did you read the book first, or did you see the movie first?
No, I saw the movie first, and then I read the book, and it was one of those things. And I saw this movie when I was like pretty young, like we're talking like 8, 9 years old or whatever. And then I went and sought out the book, and it kind of ruined me. It's like, oh, all movies and books are similar. This must be, because I was just a young little kid. I was like, oh yeah, they did a pretty good job. Like some things are different, but not so different I don't recognize it. And this is something I would always watch when it was on. And I watched this movie a lot. I mean, I didn't. To be honest with you, I didn't really watch it before he did the shows. I don't need to. It's like Blade Runner. It's like, how much do I need to watch it? Because this is, like I said, one of my top 10 favorite movies.
This is my first time watching it because I don't know. Sometimes there's like these early 70s, late 60s movies. They just didn't end up in the rotation on like TBS or TNT, so I didn't accidentally see them.
This is not a big rotation movie for
Although you think it would be, because Act 1, first thing you see, rated G.
Yeah. Interesting, because it's not a G-rated movie at all.
No.
Because there's actually like nudity and stuff in it.
It's kind of
like
violent.
Full sex nudity, but there's
no. You see the lady's tits.
And a piece symbol around her neck, which they focus in on because she's dead.
It's ironic, right?
Yeah.
Because like you think of like even like Pixar movies nowadays aren't even rated G, but that's just because the rating just doesn't mean anything anymore. It's like your movie has to be so inconsequential of like a threat to be considered a rated G movie that there's like anything that has dilemma in it, it's like it's a PG movie.
Well, Robert Wise's name must carry a certain level of like, oh, okay, I just rubber stamped this, because I think the Star Trek the Motion Picture was also G-rated.
Yeah,
I believe so. So it's like it must be, because he made so many of these. Whoever's job was to review it was like, yeah, good, G-rated movie, another Robert Wise classic.
Well, I wonder if like, because this seems almost like informational, like, you know, you're learning something here that some people are like, if the MPA at the time was like, we think everybody should see this or something like that.
Yeah. Well, you named some of the movies that came out this year. This was not like as hard hit. It was like this nothing close to Clockwork Orange.
No.
I mean, this one might have just passed through the radar. It's like, well, no one's being raped on camera, so we're good. It's G-rated. It's science. We're learning things. It doesn't negatively portray really the military, the government. It's like maybe they're caught a little short-footed, but it also manages to include all that delicious paranoia of the 70s that I love, which because that's this whole movie is about paranoia and secrets and government levels of preparedness, which being we just actually came through a pandemic is like, boy, I wish these guys were on the ball like this.
Or even if they were, I wish they could convince all the stupid people that live here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, if coronavirus turned everyone's blood into crystal and you just died horribly, probably the hillbillies would have got their shots. I'm guessing. Could be wrong. Maybe they deny it. But yeah, I mean, that's the thing is, but like my favorite scene in this movie, it's so like that 60s and 70s paranoia is like when Dr. Stone's wife, who's the daughter of a senator, the army comes and takes him away. She's like, Father, I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden, beep, this call is being terminated for national security. It's like, oh yeah, that's such 70s paranoia there. It's the beautiful.
And then so after we get the rating, we got a thing on screen. I didn't write it down, but it was basically like we were working together in accordance with the Vandenberg Air Base, which I don't know if that's real or not.
Yeah, it
with
is.
Project Scoop, which isn't real as far as I know.
As far as we know.
I mean, I'm pretty sure they're throwing satellites up there and like, hey, if they collected something, you know.
Well, that's the thing of like with this movie. It's like, oh, this is incredibly plausible.
Yeah.
You could like because Stone was like the head of the National Academy of Sciences or something, which is like where the government and science like merge to do projects. And the Air Force, if you read the credits, like the Air Force, the Jet Propulsion Laboratory at NASA, they all helped with this. They gave technical advice. Everyone was in. It's like, yeah, this is cool. So yeah, it seemed like it's like, yeah, this is all plausible. Everything in this movie, besides like technology that we know we can't even do nowadays, at least not that it doesn't cost $100,000. And this is kind of like War Games. Remember that movie where it's like, oh, that's really what NORAD is like. And then they show the actual NORAD, which it's still a big room and they still have some computer screens on the wall, but they're not 100 feet tall. And we don't have some AI like making all our strategic decisions that we know of. Yeah. But this movie is like, yeah, these all seem like normal people, like super smart normal people, but everyone's working towards a goal to deal with this situation. And it becomes it's a very likable movie for that reason, because there's no extreme stuff. There is, but it's.
But we have a credit sequence where it's like just a bunch of like, it's very almost X-Files esque. Mm-hmm. There's like stuff on there. It's like you have the definition of the Espionage Act on there. You have a bunch of top secret warning stuff. There's the bio war map.
Yep.
Which I think immediately made me compare it to War Games immediately.
Oh yeah.
And then we have credit first day.
Well, let's talk about one thing too that was introduced here and that comes up later in the movie that I also liked was the Gil Mel soundtrack.
Oh yeah.
And this guy was heavily influenced by Forbidden Planet. He loved not necessarily the theremin, but the idea of two discordant sounds coming together that don't really make a tune you can hum or anything, but they're frightening. There's like a lot of frightening music in this, but it's just basically like two forms of music coming together that don't really belong, and they have like a lot of sizzling effects and stuff, but it's not like a theme. It was like a kind of a prototype soundtrack.
Oh, yeah, it seemed almost like a proto synth thing where it's like it's not even good at doing what synth does later on, but it like has that just weird like this isn't natural thing to it.
Yeah, it's very like I said, it's I forget what they called it because I read a review of the soundtrack. It's like discordant sounds and stuff. It's designed to not necessarily be a tune you'd hum along to or listen to in your own time, but it sets a tone really well. Like science and danger and death, and it's like
you just have these like little dits in the background that's like and just it's just weird sounds. Yeah.
But when they said this guy loved the Forbidden Planet soundtrack, I was like, how? That was all done with like theremins and stuff, but it created that otherworldly vibe. And it's like, oh, that's what they mean. Because at first I didn't consider that comparison like exactly valid. It's like, oh, okay, you're just talking about another weird soundtrack. But it's like, no, this guy had a point and a direction. And the studio didn't like this or didn't like the soundtrack, but the director was like, no, this is perfect. And now everyone, when they hear this stuff, they know it's like, oh, that's Andromeda Strain.
Well, it's like there's not. Well, that's the thing. It's like it's barely a soundtrack because there's not really like music cues. It's just kind of like just weird sounds intermittent between scenes. Because you'll have like a title come on the screen, and like sometimes they'll cut to like the automatic typewriter thing, and it's almost like the typewriter is the soundtrack.
Yeah, very reminiscent of the first Godzilla movie. That intro, where you had a lot of like government documents fading in and out with black lines appearing through them. No, it actually had music, but this was cool because you got to remember this was done in like the late '60s. Like, this will get your attention.
I wrote here some soldiers, but they're actually airmen.
Yeah.
And they're spying on some town with like a night vision, or is that a starlight thing, or I can't remember, starlight scope,
whatever it was. It looked like a guy was carrying a telescope that you could see in the dark, and it was the same kind of green haze we now associate with night vision.
Yeah,
but it probably needed to be hooked up to a nuclear reactor back then to power it. I don't know. I mean, they had night vision in World War II. So.
This is exactly what happens in the book. He goes back to a van, but I think in the book he's like, it's basically like something like some prototype like Humvee or something, but the van is just like bathed in red light to like preserve their night vision or whatever.
Yeah.
All those details are included. So, and then they put titles on like Piedmont, New Mexico's population 68 or now 2.
Question mark.
And then the airmen go together, or they go out together, and they are they driving, or are they just like or are they just like going to a different vantage point? I can't remember. Anyways, they notice the birds are circling around. Okay.
Yeah.
They notice the buzzards are circling, and there's like, buzzards at night, like that doesn't make sense. And also they only come out like for dead bodies, and so it's like, oh, what's going on here? And then we cut to another titles, and then we have like it's just an air base on the edge of of like some sort of sea cliff or something.
Yeah, Vandenberg something in California. Yeah.
But like like you said, Vandenberg's real, but like that shot was a matte shot, so they made that up.
Yeah.
But it looks really cool. You don't want an air base next to the ocean.
Real quick, now Vandenberg, because it was kind of an Air Force and slash NASA thing. Now it's the Vandenberg Space Force base.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, that's all. I'm just doing a quick look. I'm not going to read an entry.
Space Force getting out there.
Yep.
I've never actually seen them. I've just seen the show. That doesn't put them in a very good light.
They're the recruiting stations around here now: Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Space Force, and the Space Force lettering looks like kind of, I think the A is just like an alpha sign with a dot in it, Space Force. It's like, oh, it's going full Stargate on us. Okay. Or maybe they did that for fun at the particular recruiting station in Ipsy.
Yeah.
I don't.
Because I mean, like looked in like what are the Space Force's standards? Like, do they actually need to recruit people? Like, what do they need bodies for?
One of the first guys that joined it was from here, and he had like an aeronautics degree from Michigan State. So that's probably exactly what they're looking. I don't think they have like a muscle division. I think they need like a lot of engineers and technicians.
Yeah, like I don't imagine like enlisting people doesn't really seem like the purpose of the Space Force. It'd be like Star Trek, where it's like everybody's an officer because everybody's graduated from college.
Yeah, I don't think there's like a Space Force Commandos, like their version of the Navy SEALs would be like the Moon Rocks or something. Like they're not there yet. They will be. Give it 100 years, and they'll be like jumping out of shuttles and doing Halo stuff. But
you gotta watch that season 2 of For All Mankind.
Oh, I have.
Okay, yeah, they get there. Oh, there it's just NASA. They don't call them. They're not the Space Force.
Yeah.
They're inside the Air Force base, and there's like they get a call from the airmen there at the town, and this is all done like a radio play, so you never see what's happening. You just get like their play by play of like they're describing it. And like they're going to go retrieve the scoop satellite, and then they start talking about like, oh, there's bodies all over the town.
Let's not forget in the van the giant satellite dish that comes out of the roof.
Yeah.
A special effect that almost didn't work because, like, is that door going to close before it starts spinning around? Because it's a 1950s radar dish that comes out of the roof of this van, and I'm thinking to myself, where are they storing that giant thing in that little van? But it looks kind of cool.
They say something like approached in white, and then there's like a weird sound, and then everything goes radio silent. So it's
the
like,
guy screams. So one of them screams really.
Yeah, but they make it seem like it's something out of Predator. It's like all weird to like make you think like, oh, what could it be? It's like, it's just a person being weird.
Yeah.
Although, is there something in the book where it's like almost like way more violent because they have stuff where like somebody grabs a chainsaw and cuts their head off or something like that?
Yeah, there's kind of suicides that the people, because most of the people died instantly from Andromeda because it just turns your blood into crystals, which you wouldn't live very long after that. But people who had irregularities, like they didn't know this at the time.
Yeah.
They didn't know what was going on. But yeah, like there was one guy that someone had diabetes and someone else had, so it was killing them slower, or it wasn't killing them at all, but they thought like the rapture had happened or something, and they just went crazy. Yeah, like somebody did I thought it was a hatchet. Maybe it was a chainsaw suicide.
But what's described in the book is horrific, and they kind of like they play it down here. So
yeah, the really awful stuff almost always happens off camera here, and it's just like a bunch of guys sitting around. What do you think? Didn't we know about this? You know, it's which is sort of cool. I kind of appreciate that in a way.
But yeah,
because that's how you really see things. Like you don't in real life when horrible stuff happens, you're just reading the after action report. Like you're not there, hopefully. So that's why I relate to this. It's like, what does this mean?
So they decided to like, not send in more people because they don't know what happened because they described, the whole town's dead. It's like, well, something bad is there. So they sent an F4 Phantom to do a flyover with like a hull mounted camera, and they see the dead bodies everywhere. Then we have Air Force Major Manchek declares an emergency, and he has like a key that says like fire on it, or in case of fire use, and it's just like, and it hooks up to a red phone that's just some secret phone, and he goes like, and he declares like, this is a wildfire alert, and then that sends into action a bunch of stuff.
A very Cold War, like we need keys to open the phone, to leave a pre-recorded message, because no one actually talks to the colonel. He's just like, please record your message, and says his name, Piedmont or whatever, and it's like, I'm declaring a wildfire or something, and it's like, oh, okay.
And then we have an insert shot of like a printer just like writing out a bunch of names of people who have top secret clearance, which I thought the numbers to the right meant their age, but then like one of them's like 105. It's like, this is their age. I don't know what that number means.
No, this movie introduces a lot of I think the people who made Half-Life like this movie, because there's always like random background chatter, noise, numbers that are unrelated to anything. Like THX 1138 did a lot of that too. It's like, run a 215 on the 426, and it's like, what is this background chatter? It doesn't mean anything.
That whenever that popped up, and it's like the short circuit and like relay 5, please, let's like, I'm like, are our heroes supposed to be doing that relay change, or is that just a general announcement?
Yeah, these jobs are kind of busy here. We're working on I don't have time to check for a busted fuse. Manifold temperature is at 625 F. It's like, well, you better get somebody on that. None of these people ever react to it. I assumed it was put in afterwards.
Oh yeah, obviously, yeah. It was just like kind of.
It was very Half-Life-y.
I mean, it made sense. It was like, hey, I mean, that's kind of like the weird thing is there's like, it seems like there's hundreds of people in there, but you meet 6 of them.
Yeah. There was a lot of economy of scale in this movie.
Yeah. Then we have a couple of MPs show up, or airmen or something. Like there's like a captain there, and they go to collect. There's like a formal dinner party going on, and they go to collect Dr. Stone, and that's when. But they talk to his wife first, and she's all concerned, and she's the one that later goes up and calls her senator dad, and the phone picks up. It's like, your message is being recorded.
Your call's being terminated due to national security. Please wait for an update. It's like, oh, there's more guys coming with M16s. Talk to me.
And then, yeah, the MP captain or whatever he is, he just says like, "It's Mr. Stone. There's a fire," and then like they leave without explanation.
Yeah.
And then like Dr. Stone's like just put on like a whole like I don't know what it'd be at the whatever jumbo jet at the time. He gets the whole plane to himself.
Yeah, it's TWA product placement. It's like I feel like Howard Hughes. Like there's a reference.
We have the rest of the team being assembled, which is like this is this is probably why you liked it in a kid, because this is what kids love, is when, because this is like superhero stuff. It's like,
yeah,
here's somebody who's an expert in their field. We're going to get an expert in all the fields, and we're going to put them in a team together, and they're going to solve all the world's problems.
Yeah.
And it's like, and not everybody knows everything, but one person knows everything about one thing.
Yeah.
And then a moment's going to happen, and like, oh, we just happen to have the person that can solve this problem. So yeah, that's great. I always love that stuff. So.
Well, that's kind of also a very American thing, because we've sort of relied on that, especially throughout our existence in the 20th century. We have so many people here, and everyone comes here to make money and, you know, not like work in a police state. It's like we do have those experts here. You know, it's like, hey, do we have a guy who knows anything about molecular bionics or so, you know, some weird obscure I'm just making that up, but yeah. It's like, yeah, actually we do. We have the foremost guy in the world at MIT. It's like, but he's kind of got a cranky personality. Well, that's okay. We can get him, because that's how we made the nuclear bombs. You know, it's like, hey, we have people that could. Yeah, we do actually. They're all a bunch of communists, but
we get Dr. Charles Dutton gets called in, played by David Wayne. His family's like, he's with his wife and daughter, and like they're super suspicious because like previously, like with the Dr. Stone's wife, she's just like, oh, well, I guess I don't get to know what's going on. But Dutton's family is like, are like pretty smart, and they're like, hey, something bad is happening.
Does this have to do with, well, because Dutton has a background in, he doesn't trust like things the government does because of like bio and chemical warfare and stuff. So he kind of has a background in that, because remember there's a lot of jumping around in this movie of before and after and all that, and yeah, because he's kind of like vaguely paranoid about like bio warfare and stuff. It's like, oh, these guys are going to ruin the world, because even his daughter comes in. It's like, Dad, does this have something to do with like germ warfare? Like, I don't know, you know.
And then we have a different scene. We have Dr. Levitt, played by Kate Reid. She's probably the best character in the movie.
Yeah, best character in the movie.
Who's like unfortunate, because she's also like not necessarily intentionally, but she ends up being kind of the weak link of the team, because she like has a seizure at the really bad time.
Yeah,
like but she's the best. Yeah, she's the best character.
I kind of like the surgeon too.
Yeah, he's all right.
He's sort of like he's kind of got an abrasive personality, but he's also like a no BS guy.
Well, he's also like the cipher too. It's like, here's a doctor who doesn't know anything.
Yeah, he's just like the best surgeon in the world, and but he doesn't. You know, he's like, he knows we need him to look at the patients. He might have to dissect the baby, which is alluded to. It's like weirdly alluded to in the movie. We don't know where this is gonna go.
She's grabbed up under protest because she's like doing stuff with various like, I don't know, bacteria samples or whatever, and it's around the clock work, and she seems to be ill in some way because she's also smoking and like kind of like taking a stagger step every once in a while, but then she like reluctantly goes with them. It's like, I guess we gotta go save the world.
Yeah.
And then we have Dr. Mark Hall. He just gets called out of surgery. And this is the scene where they have Michael Crichton in the background with some medical scrubs, a very young Michael Crichton.
Yeah.
A young, still 6'9" Michael Crichton.
Scoop for us, Michael. Just kind of bend at the knees, stay in the shot.
Yeah, they had him in a chair, so he didn't have to like be all weird and tall on the scenes. But still, you know, him in a chair is like, oh, you're a normal like
me standing.
And I have that being the end of Act 1 is like, well, the team's assembled. Also, I kind of like make act breaks because they have titles for the days. And so it's like, titles, second day. It's like, all right, well, I guess that's Act 2. I'm guessing at this stuff. So we have Hall and Stone are in a helicopter and hazmat suits. They're on their way to Piedmont. And then we have I think we cut away and we have titles where it says the Senate Committee on Space Sciences closed hearing April 14th, 1971. And then like we have a senator who's like skeptical of the wildfire lab. It's like, why do we need this thing? This is super expensive.
Wasn't it like $90 million or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was,
I guess
like, I don't know what $1 trillion in today's money.
I mean, at this time, I guess during 71, Nixon would be the president, but that's never brought up. It's just kind of like, there's a president, he exists. We're not talking to him.
Yeah.
It's relayed
great
between
if they had Nixon in there.
Well, yeah, we'll get to that. There's a great thing where it's like basically something gets screwed up, and then essentially the president balking at it actually ends up saving everybody.
Yeah.
Then we have there's like a general there, and he reveals the stone, like what Project Scoop is. Like, oh, we're trying to get biological warfare elements out of space. and I get like Stone wasn't aware of that because he set up the whole wildfire project. So
yeah.
It's like, so it's basically they had him set it up to combat these things, but also to make these things.
Yeah, combat and / nurture.
Which he didn't do that. He didn't want that to be the thing. He just wanted it as a defensive mechanism. Then there's like a separate advisory committee, and they go over like the details of the lab, and they talk about how it's like equipped with a nuke to blow up in case of an outbreak, which will be brought up over and over again. So.
Yeah, which is mentioned ad nauseum. It's supposed to be a hammer hanging over everyone's head. Doesn't really work that way, but when it does, it's like, oh, this is frightening for multiple reasons, but it's still laid on a little heavy. It's my least favorite part of the story. Is like, yes, there's a nuke in the base, we get it.
Well, when you're not moving from place to place or in one isolated location and nobody's pointing a gun to people's heads. You have to have like, well, here's the metaphorical gun, and it's a huge gun. I mean, that's the way it is in the book, right?
Yeah, in the book, it's described as like, yes, it's a thing, and it's there, and it kind of goes into an explanation of, I don't know, it's kind of like early interpretation of game theory. It's like, oh, it doesn't, we've got the guy who, will make the decision to turn it on or off based on, his marital status and his connections to the outside world, but it's also also chance. Like, we have statistics, but we don't, we have very low success rate with people actually arming and detonating the device in simulations. We have a much higher level of success if someone is in charge of not arming the bomb, but turning it off. It's like that. So there's more of an explanation of
it's the odd man theory. That's why, because Hall isn't single, so they're like he'll be more likely to carry out an order than everybody else. Although, funnily, if you look at the sheet and they have all the different people and their odds of it, like Stone is like actually has the highest percentage of completing the task.
Yeah. But that's why it's a theory. That's why how game theory works. It's not, you don't necessarily go with the best option. You go with the option that combines the best of like statistics, logic, and just like, what do you think people will do? It's very
statistics are weird because it seems like they're not wrong, but they have to be applied correctly, and they can be applied incorrectly.
All of our nuclear war is basically, at least American concepts of nuclear conflict were always based very heavily on what a bunch of Harvard mathematicians and statisticians came up with, because it was guys like McNamara and all that brought that level of logic to. It's like it can't just be an emotional decision. You know, it's got to blend the best things, and yeah, that's why they've overthought nuclear war to an insane level. So yeah, that's what this comes from.
So then we come back to the helicopter and they're flying over the town. They see birds eating the flesh of the dead townspeople, so they drop gas on the town to kill the birds. They make sure to have like an off, an off-camera line of them going like, "It'll just kill the birds."
We hope. Give them a double dose. It's like, will a double dose just kill the birds? But no. We don't.
Then we have Stone and Hall repel from the helicopter, although they just cut to them kicking out a ladder and then they're immediately on the ground. So,
yeah, they're not repelling in like.
Yeah, let's not have 50-year-old men from a shaky helicopter descending in hazmat suits on a shaky ladder.
Cool looking suits, though. Even by today's standards, those would look hot futuristic.
Yeah. Also, like they're talking to the helicopter pilot, and he's like, "Yeah, come back and pick you up, right?" He's like, "Yeah, if this doesn't work out, we're all dead." And they say something about exterminating the pilot. And he's like, "Hey, that's me."
Well, no, the pilot says, "Well, I heard if this goes bad, it's like they burn the helicopter." Doesn't say anything about the pilot though, and everyone just kind of looks at each other. It's like, all right, let's go. Good luck, Bob, or whatever his name is.
So Stone and Hall, like they're in the town and there's just dead people and animals all over the place. They talk about how like the virus killed people so fast they're in like mid stride and nobody had like a grimace on their face so they didn't die of a heart attack.
Yeah.
Because Hall's the doctor, so he's like, or the medical doctor, so he's like more in tune with trying to figure out like a cause of death. Also have like it's like edited really interesting where they have kind of like window panes of different shots, kind of like on the left is like the moving shot, and then they'll just have like pictures of dead people pop up on the right in different ways. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah, it's cool. I've never seen it done quite like that.
It's almost like Brady Bunch, but just cutting to dead people.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird scenes like that in the movie. There's a lot of foreground, background stuff in this movie. That's more like just split screens. Like two guys walking, and then we have another panel of corpses, and it's kind of effective though.
I mean, also like the shot on the left where that's following the scientist. That's always a moving shot, and then all the other shots that pop up are just kind of almost just static. It makes it easier to follow and just interesting. There's also where you get the topless lady who's like a hippie or something.
Yeah.
And they really hold on it for like a weird time.
Yeah, zoom in a little bit.
Yeah, they literally do.
A lot of the reasons I heard those some of those images were still was this. The Piedmont was actually a town. It's called Shafter, Texas, and it had a very low population. And they just asked the people in the town, "Hey, you want to be in a movie?" Yeah, okay. Some people still go there as a tourist thing because it's. Huh. It looks exactly like the town. You know, it is the town in Texas.
Huh. I thought that town was so sparse. It looked like it was just like it had to be built by Hollywood or something. It looked like it was like those Western towns they built just for shooting movies. Like,
kind of feels that way. It was actually cheaper to just go to a town and get everyone on board. It's like, hey, you want to be in a movie? Yeah. Okay, lay down on the ground.
But I'm just saying, like, that's how weirdly sparse that town looked. Is like it looked like it was fake.
It didn't look like a happy place.
No.
Your town's fake, bro.
I mean, that just sounds like where criminals reside to get away from the law. It's like, well, we've all agreed we're not going to turn ourselves in.
We're going to hide out in this church. That church, by the way, that features prominently in the shots of town, still there.
Huh.
Just looked it up on YouTube. It looks a little different now, but yeah, it's still there.
Hall keeps seeing flashes of fighter jets that are circling around in case they need to nuke the town.
Yeah.
They
find a lot of free-use nukes in this movie. It's like, yeah, we're going to nuke towns, labs, everything. Like,
I mean, they do have a thing later on where they have to say, like, no, this has to go to the president. So he has
to explain it to the Russians.
Yeah. They find some lady who, like, hung herself. So they're like, oh, well, that's different. She didn't immediately die like all the other people.
And she wrote a weird note saying that this is like
the end
end of,
times.
yeah, God have mercy on my soul because I'm killing myself. Which that was sad, but then we go to another suicide. That was weird.
Yeah. One guy drowned himself in like a shallow tub.
Yeah, and even the doctor was like, "I didn't think that was possible."
Then they find the dead airman. They also find out that like people aren't bleeding from their wounds. I was like, that's weird.
Yeah, because when the airman fell over on the steering wheel, you could see like his forehead was busted, like it had a big split in it. It was like there's no one's bleeding. This is weird.
And then they cut to like where the buzzards were like pecking into people, and like there's no blood streaks or anything. And then Stone Hall take the airman's van, just kick him out of there, to go find the satellite. And they find out the doctor's office because somebody like found the satellite and say, "Oh, let's take it to the smartest person in town." And they open it up and kill everybody.
Yeah.
And then here's a weird scene where Hall just like knocks over the dead doctor and like starts taking his pants off and looking at his butt. He's like, "Look, it didn't pull."
Sounds like, that's not funny. He says, I don't have no sense of humor. I'm not being funny. He's like, "Look, there's no lividity." It's like, what's wrong with the blood? It's like, I don't know. Let's prop him up and slit his wrist.
Yeah, and then just red sand pours out of this guy's wrist.
Yeah, it's like red Kool-Aid.
And then they take the satellite to the van, and then I think the helicopter's kind of hovering around a bit here. Kind of comes in and out. They hear a baby crying, and so they move into action and they wave off the helicopter, even though their oxygen is like down to 30 minutes. And then they find a baby alive. They load the baby into the helicopter, and there's a guy in white robes like holding a butcher knife, and he's like screaming at him, and then he just kind of like succumbs to like some stomach pain and falls over. Which I'm guessing that's an ulcers and not the Andromeda strain.
Yeah, because he lives throughout the whole movie.
Yeah.
But who's been drinking like fuel oil for 20 years, or what they call it, sterno. Yeah,
sterno. Squeeze.
Yeah. So he's a stew bum, and he's got of course he gave himself an ulcer because like drinking fuel oil is not good for your guts. Drinking alcohol isn't good for your guts, but.
I think he got the ulcers from alcohol, and then he drinks the sterno to fight the ulcers.
Yeah, aspirin and squeeze.
Yeah. So yeah, they load everybody up in the helicopter, and Hall gives an order that like the town should be destroyed, but I can't remember. It's like Order 714 or something like that.
Yeah.
To nuke the town.
712, I think. Yeah.
Oh, okay. They have titles: White House, Situation Room, 2:40 Eastern Standard Time. And then, this is where they're trying to work out how they can nuke the town, like, because they have to inform the Russians. But the president doesn't want to, like, so the president doesn't want to do that. So they just send in the National Guard to block off routes to the town.
Yeah.
This information basically never gets back to the team.
Yeah, there's a whole explanation about why.
The bell didn't ring.
We'll get into that later.
We have cut to another titles screen. It says Flat Rock County, Nevada, 11:55 a.m. They don't say where it was, so we're assuming that's the local time because that's where we're spending all the movie in this area. So, then here we have Dutton and Levitt. They're on their way to the wildfire base. It's made to look nondescript, like they're talking about. They spent like $50,000 just to cover up the tracks of the of all the construction equipment. And it's made to look nondescript. It's just like some farm that they're growing barley at, and it says
U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Yeah. And they're walking in there and saying howdy to people wearing cowboy hats and looking kind of like farmers, and they step into a maintenance closet, and it's an elevator that takes them down to the subterranean lab.
Now I always had a problem with this scene. It's cool, but it always made me wonder, like, because you just walk into a closet and it's got like rakes and hammers and equipment, and he just flips the switch and just this platform starts going down, and you're not stepping into an elevator. Yeah. And I was thinking to myself, what if someone walks in there by mistake and falls down the shaft and kills Dutton and the other lady, and it's like, oh well, we're done now. It's like, I don't know if the floor came back over it. They didn't show that. But I always thought it was like, what a nightmare scenario. It's like, oh, I got to get some toilet paper. And then you're falling down a 200-foot elevator shaft, killing the two people below. But, that's just my
Or
weird.
one of those garden rakes come loose and just impale the doctor.
Yeah, it's just like, this hammer's hanging on the wall and shit. What are we doing here? This isn't safe.
Hall and Stone get back on their own in a different part of the lab, and they're like super cleaned by like some UV radiation or something. Yeah. This is probably one of the lamest effects in the movie.
Yeah. It all doesn't hold up, folks, but it's still a cool movie.
And then we have Dutton and Levitt like meet Stone and Hall, so like the whole team's gathered around now, or they know each other. They walk around a red tube-like hallways
with red coveralls.
Yeah. They meet Sergeant Burke, who's like the facilities technician for that level or something.
He's the overall communications guy.
Oh, okay. He kind of explains how like everything's computer controlled and how if the worst happens, everything will still work. He also explains the messaging system because that's going to be the point of error throughout the movie.
Yeah. The bell doesn't ring, no message. He's kind of an ass about it to Dr. Stone and who's the other guy? Dr. Hall sort of smiles at him like, oh, I appreciate this guy. Dr. Stone needs to be taken down a few pegs.
The team getting fresh clothes and like to have like their personal effects and their glasses turned in because they need to be separately sterilized and stuff. This is where Stone explains the keys in the nukes. There's like a substation. So like Stone inserts a key, twists it, and now the nuke is armed. And so now Hall has the other key, and in case of an outbreak, the timer automatically go off, and he's the only person that can stop the timer from completing.
Oh, and Dr. Levitt can't smoke in the facility.
Yeah.
Which for the 70s was like, wow, that's what? They used to have like ashtrays built into the consoles where you launch nuclear missiles from. It's like they had ashtrays in aircraft back then.
Well, they don't get coffee for the rest of the movie. They get some weird nutrient paste to try to control as many variables as possible.
Well, they're basically trying to sterilize the human body.
Yeah.
Which is nothing but like brains on the top, shit on the bottom, everything else kind of in the middle degrading towards that. And it's like, how do you sterilize that? They don't use those terms, but that's essentially how do you sterilize the human body? It's like, well, and keep the body alive? You don't, but.
So and then Stone's this is where Stone shows off the 3D schematic of the lab, which is a really cool effect. It's very simple, but it looks like a 3D computer image, and it totally is not.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Their 5 levels. They're all cylindrical shape, but like as Nathan said, it's all the same set, just painted different colors, which is a very very great way to extend your budget of your movie.
Oh yeah.
I mean, they do it all the time in space shows, Star Trek and stuff like that. So, just have one hallway and shoot it from a different angle. It's a different hallway. It's all hallways on this ship, man.
Yeah, it's a big ship. It's a big base.
Every level is color coded, and there's also like video screens like all over the base, which, like you said, for this time would be like, wildly impractical, and like no one would probably have seen that before. I mean, I don't mean like in Star Trek that came out before this, and you had the big view screen, but it wasn't necessarily like.
Yeah, but that's like future tech.
Yeah.
The movie it's like
supposed to be contemporary.
All the great Michael Crichton books and everything. It's like, this is contemporary. Like maybe the government is at the edge of this.
Yeah, if you had enough money, this could exist.
Yeah, and it never did. Nor is it explained like. And it's not needed. It's just like they explain enough in this movie. They don't need to go like, and the view screen works like it's rear projection.
And then we have time for decontamination and immunization. They have to go through like
every cup of coffee at this point in the movie. If you want to go get something, Get you a cup of coffee because this is going to be a long, cool, but for some people very boring scene. I think
Yeah.
the longest scene of exposition in a movie ever. I'm
Um,
totally spitballing that, but it's pretty long.
yeah, everyone has to get naked. They have to get like some paper coveralls, and they have to keep going through all these different levels. And like every level has a different way to like basically purify the human body so it doesn't affect the organism they'll be working, or the not sure what you call it. Just the
Just the
would be a
it's just lab sterilization is what you're trying
yeah.
to make because you don't want to introduce like flatulence and Andromeda together because it could form something that turns
Yeah.
everyone into paste. So, yeah, it's
They
you
have
don't
to go.
want cross pollination.
They have to go another process where they talk to a computer at the base, which I'm guessing this is the intentional joke because we're at like Dr. Hall's like saying his name is like Mark Hall, and the computer's like, please say your surname first. And he's like, Hallmark. My parents are assholes. um,
And these scenes are interspersed with whenever you go to a new level, coveralls going into a incinerator pit.
yeah.
Each different color goes in because they find out that, oh no, these are paper, and it's like they are. It's like they feel like cloth. So it's made.
Yeah, it's new stuff. Just came out.
Yeah, just came out.
They got a bunch of scans. Like they have like a computer arms attaching diodes to levets. There's
Yeah,
one
the computer arms in this movie are a little ridiculous. It's like, yeah, we're just going to do this really fine detail work with these arms that obviously do not articulate as well as you would think. But
I'm not sure that arms in that scene, but the arms in the the lab rat scene,
yeah.
those are real like nuclear reactor controlling arms.
Oh, okay.
They got like because they had access to that stuff. They're just like, hey, what's this? And so they got access to like, oh, we use these on nuclear reactors where it just mimics your arm movements. Like that's a real thing a company made. And they just like let them have it for the movie shoot.
Oh, okay.
I mean, they still do look ridiculous.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, they don't seem like they could execute some of the maneuvers they're trying to do. Like you can't do
yeah.
fine manipulation with that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's like they're not computer controlled. They are mimicking human movement. Like,
Yeah.
like you control like the shadow arms and you make the thing do it, but like your movement's also not precise. But, yeah, they have this one where like everybody gets naked. They put a metal helmet on and like
Yeah, this was cool. I always remember this.
What they call it, like a xenon flash, and like it burns all their like the first layer of their skin off.
Yeah, because they put this helmet on, they're completely naked, and then it's like the screen just whites out almost. It's like, oh wow, what happened? And then it cuts back to them, and they take the helmet off, and their hair and everything from the neck up looks normal, but they have this white ash all over their body. And then the computer calmly explains, it's like, yeah, the first 3 layers of your skin have been vaporized. It's like, huh.
And apparently because of that process, they have to rest for 6 hours on level 4.
Because your body is like, before you go into shock.
Before they descend down to level 5.
Now, in the book, they had to swim through stuff, too. They didn't include that here.
The only thing they had that one part where, like, they have Levitt, like, walking through some weird gunk, but that's probably the closest you get.
Yeah, in the book, they had to, like, swim from one point to another, and they had to tell them, don't panic or you'll drown, because no one will be in there with you, so you have to swim from here to here. It wasn't like Navy SEAL stuff, but it was still like, yeah, you're just submerged in chemicals. And but that was obviously changed for, like, practical reasons. Like, you can't include that.
We're not building an aquarium for this movie.
Yeah, this isn't Titanic.
Oh yeah, they have Hall's like staring at the substation, and like he like fondles the key, and like there's loose wires there. Is that the substation? And I'm like, no.
Remember they said in the briefing on level 1 or at the top, it's like they were installing extra substations, so the odd man had a better chance of disarming if necessary, but they weren't complete yet.
Yeah,
because they only had a limited amount of them, so that's what that was.
Which I'm not sure the one on this level if it's complete, or the one on level 5 isn't complete, which is probably like that's your most important one, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, it seemed a little odd. It seemed a little
But you
short-sighted.
know, but we've already been through how long it takes to get to level 5, so I can understand. Um, Maybe you should just put on a mirror suit and hiked it down the center
Yeah,
core.
I mean, you can be exposed to Andromeda in a suit out in Piedmont. So maybe let's get the technicians with some suits on. But
um, yeah, that's why I write down like there's a bunch of people around, but like they don't interact with them. They interact with very few people, but they make it look like it's it's a government working facility and they're doing stuff. They rest for the 6 hours, and everybody kind of like either has a dream sequence or has like a flashback sequence that kind of like what their expertise is or what their fear is. So, then we have titles. Third day. Hall gets woken up by the computer. He's infatuated by the computer. They tell him it's a 63-year-old lady that records voice messages.
and they say he's being unprofessional.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, whatever. You brought me here. I didn't come take it. So.
The team assemble in the cafeteria. Like they detail how the nutrition is handled. So like even their nutrition is controlled, so it can't like interact with Andromeda in some weird way. And then as they're done eating,
like RoboCop paste at that point.
And then on their way out, they get handed suppositories.
The final indignity.
Yeah, we haven't covered the GI tract yet, so here you go.
Like I said, it's the body is just like all brains up top, all shit at the bottom.
Yeah. Here's where they show off the robotic arms they're being worked with, and they expose the rat to the satellite, and it dies almost immediately. Then they expose a monkey that dies as well, and the behind the scenes on this is weird as shit.
Scary. It's like you wouldn't do this anymore, but
they had like
a. I mean, they didn't die. The animals didn't die.
But they had a representative on set to make sure animals were safe, and they're like, "That's cool."
Yeah.
So they just they put this monkey in a room and they exposed it to carbon dioxide until it passed out and looked like it's dead, and they called cut and then brought over an oxygen mask and it came right back to life.
Yeah.
Presumably.
But the way they made it look like it was dying was like the little cage. And actually the shot of the room is kind of a composite because it was really shot in a small space, and inside the cage was oxygen. And inside the room they were shooting it in was carbon dioxide. Yeah, not monoxide. That would have killed it. So when they lifted it up, it's like, well, that just displaces all the oxygen it's burning off. And then, of course, it just starts shaking and falling over. It's like, God, that's realistic. How'd they train that monkey to do that? And how could they train a rat to do it? You can't. And then you find out, no, they actually killed the damn things almost and brought them back to life. And the APSA or whatever guy was on set is like, yeah, do it. Just as long as it's back to life. And they had had one shot too. Those scenes were the only takes of that.
Yeah. Because
a lot of people were, even back then, they were kind of like, dude, we could just film ourselves murdering this thing, and that could lead to some problems.
I heard an interesting thing. I was there. I saw the corridor crew guys. They're doing the effects breakdown for that movie that's on Netflix called RRR, which is like a big Bollywood action movie.
Okay.
Which actually, like, if you see it isolated, like, this looks great. It's so absurd and crazy. And they talk about like how they don't use animals at all. So a lot of the special effects they use in India is just like doing special effects for animals and stuff in movies, because they just don't use them, because they even using them to put on film they consider it to be cruel. So it's all CG.
Well, yeah, that's where the souls of their ancestors went or something. Is into those animals. I mean, I'm not an expert on that, but I understand from the few Indian guys I've talked to, because I actually asked, it's like, what's the thing with the cows, dude? Can you explain that to me? And he did kind of explain it to me. And it's like, oh, so you think that's like a human soul in there that's just free of all concern? Is basically how he explained it to me. I was like, oh, that's interesting. I said, we have a cold, dark God. Nothing nice happens like that with our God. So That's why we just butcher these things wholesale. What the Bible says.
Um, we have Hall's working with Karen Anson. She's like a med technician, but also the nurse or everything.
Mm-hmm. Basically, a computer technician in medical science.
Yeah,
something like that. Because Dr. Hall's not great with computers. Especially those computers, the old run, error, enter things. There's no point and click back then. You got to type in the right commands at the right time, or it just says error.
Oh, I forgot they load the monkey and the rat bodies on the elevator, but it kind of take too long a time to show off the arms. Whatever. They thought they were cool. They wanted to show them off.
I mean, they're cool, but back then I imagine that was cool.
Yeah. So we have Karen Anson. She's showing off like the med room where they have the baby and Mr. Jackson. They should like the suits to get in there are really interesting because you kind of just jump into it and it's like attached to the wall and it's kind of a flexible like air duct or whatever.
Yeah, you sort of look like Robbie the robot with the helmet. It's kind of like that's a throwback to the 50s. Maybe it would be completely sterile though, as long as you didn't cut through it.
Which that's what they say specifically. It's like, yeah, it'd be okay. Just the only thing cut it is a scalpel.
Yep.
Which is a point later on. And then we have Dutton's like learning that the contagion is spread through air, which they already kind of figured out when they expose the air to the rat and stuff like that. But they especially have it like they have a filter to determine like how large it is, and so they have a filter of like, and they figure it out. It's like, oh, it's at least bigger than 2 micrometers. So they're like, huh? Microns. Yeah. So they're like, so it's not a virus because a virus could only get that big or whatever. So they know that. They know what it isn't.
Yeah.
So I think in my notes I kept calling it a virus, and then I made sure to call it like a contagion because like we don't know what it is.
Yeah, it's a crystalline life form.
Yeah, but they don't even know that yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Hall's looking over the patients. This is where he learns out his name's Jackson, and he's severely anemic, which means like it kind of means he's like asthmatic and he doesn't produce enough blood cells.
Well,
at least that's what. Well, I don't know. I looked up. Well, he says anemic, and I looked up like, what exactly does that mean? It basically means he's not getting enough oxygen, and also means you're not producing enough red blood cells. But that was just the dictionary definition of it. So
yeah, well, he has an ulcerated stomach, so he's bleeding into his stomach.
Yeah,
and it's like a constant open internal wound, which affects your blood chemistry, which is important. I mean, not that I know anything about it. I just know what the movie says.
So yeah, they confirmed that the contagion was inhaled. Stone and Levitt find a piece of meteorite with like green stuff on it and around. It's like some carbon mesh fiber in the satellite.
Plus the scoop.
Yeah. The green stuff kind of like vibrates and changes color for a bit. They have Levitt see it first, and she's like, "Am I seeing things?" And then they confirm it, like when Dutton's like, "Yeah, I saw that too." And she's like, "Oh, great." I guess we forget to mention, like when they're walking in the building with Dutton and Levitt.
Oh yeah,
there's some blinking red lights, and she's like hiding her eyes, and he's like, "What's the problem?" And she's like, "I don't like red lights from my days of working in a bordello."
Which is just a throwaway thing, just like the weird stuff she'd say to deflect, her abrasive personality to deflect from any weakness.
They move the rock to a container because they need like a deeper scan because apparently they can only do so much with the magnifying glasses they have. They need to get it under an electron microscope, which I thought they did it like the next time they scan it, but I guess there's like a deeper electron microscope they use later on, but
it's all big tech.
Yeah.
And by big tech, I mean like this electron microscope takes up a room.
Yeah. But they're fearful of the Andromeda strain. It's not called that yet, but that's the name of the book, so that's the name of the movie.
Yeah.
They're fearful of it because they see that it's growing. They're like, oh no. Then Hall needs to figure out like why Jackson's body is acidic, and then they figure like, oh, he has an ulcer and he's been fighting the ulcer pain with a bottle of aspirin and some Sterno,
which will help your stomach to no end.
Which, if you don't know what Sterno is, it's like a little like silver puck they use to light on fire to like cook things.
Keep things warm at weddings. Catered weddings, you see those little cans of Sterno. But yeah, you can liquefy that stuff with boiling water, and apparently you can get drunk off of it. Because unlike gasoline and alcohol, or like rubbing alcohol, which is wood alcohol, for some reason you can get drunk off Sterno. But it's like you could buy the cheapest rot gut liquor and be better, 10 times better than that.
Yeah, I think
never tried it, but yeah.
Yeah, I think I forget what, there's 2 halls it breaks down to, but one of them is methyl hall, so.
Yeah.
And then we have a pilot like flying over we have cut to a pilot flying over the Piedmont town, and he dies of the contagion and crashes, and it said it infected him at 23,000 feet, and like, this is probably one of the weirdest parts of the movie.
Yeah, because he's flying. It's basically the same set and pilot actor, I think, who took pictures of the town earlier. It's not the same guy, but it looks like the same guy. And like the rubber on his
face
mask he's wearing starts dissolving. Like it looks like someone's throwing powder on him.
Yeah.
And then the plane like crashes, but they don't show it. They just it's like they show the instruments in the plane going over, and then it says, then there's a red X on a map. It says crash site, and it's like shows a picture of the town, and then the crash site's marked with a red X. And you're like, what the hell's going on? It's like, what is this? This is what Andromeda did before. But again, this is another one of those things that's kind of shot out of sequence with what's going on in the base, and we have an update about it. And
yeah. We have titles: Big Head Pass, Utah, 1:20 p.m.
Yeah.
The Air Force guys are listening to a radio message where he talks about like the rubber hoses on the plane were disintegrating from the contagion.
Well, he doesn't know what it's from because he accidentally flew over Piedmont. It was a training.
Yeah, but this is what he's saying over, like he thinks over the radio.
Okay.
But this is also like where they get like a confusion thing, because he was saying the rubber was disintegrating, but then like somebody later on it's like, well, the F4 Phantom doesn't have rubber, it has polycron.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is. Then we're back at Wildfire, and they put the rock under an electron microscope, and they say the rock is like more of a plastic than it is a rock.
Yeah.
And so this is where you're supposed to connect things. Like, oh, it's so. And so they think the team think that Piedmont's been vaporized by this point.
Yeah.
It's like, well, good thing we got that done. And then Hall goes off to figure out what the baby and Jackson have in common, and how they could fight the Andromeda strain.
Yeah, because it's like, what does a 65-year-old alcoholic and a newborn baby have in common? And you think, well, nothing. Obviously.
And then we cut back to we're in Utah, and the Air Force is just like going over the plane crash, and apparently just the Andromeda strain went away.
Yeah.
But not before, because they say like the F4 Phantom is like not made out of rubber, or the rubber parts aren't made out of rubber, it's polycron. But they also say it's like very similar to human skin. And so, like, apparently the Andromeda strain also just ate the pilot. And they're just like,
they just find like smooth bones in the plane. And this never comes up again. I mean, part of it does, but it's like, wait a minute, it just dissolved the pilot? Like, what the hell's going on here?
And nobody else in the area is getting, like, nothing's happening to them. It just like this. Yeah, so it's like it's just a part that sticks out to me, because it didn't really add to anything other than like, oh, it's going to eat through the rubber at the base and it's going to cause a problem. So
yeah. But then we do kind of find out something later that like makes sense. I don't, because we're talking about the electron microscope, and they make a crucial discovery about Andromeda.
Yeah.
Is that it mutated under the microscope.
Yeah.
And they're like, that's when they're like, definitely nothing like on Earth does that, because you don't mutate and divide at the same time. It's like not on Earth at least. And so that I think that's what that was supposed to be, but it was such a jarring scene, and you're
Yeah.
expecting more
Well,
connection. You don't.
It's
get
somewhat explained later on because they're saying that like Andromeda turned into an inert version of itself.
it. Yeah.
And it doesn't necessarily like, it doesn't have to give a reason why. It just says like it just does that. But it doesn't explain like why to eat the pilot and then stop eating the pilot. That didn't make sense. It should have eaten all those other Air Force guys too.
Yeah, all the rubber tires and stuff should have dissolved, and the people should have dissolved, like in Indiana Jones, and the movie gets an R rating.
God sent the Andromeda Strain.
Yeah, that's the end of the movie. That's what it means. And then the Ark of the Covenant's in Piedmont. Gets really weird. Well, this movie takes a hard turn. So it goes from pure science to pure superstition.
They knew by that point they had to hook the audience and convince them that it's not up to humanity. It's all God's will. So.
Well, they had to write that stuff like that into the day the Earth stood still, right?
Oh no.
Yeah, they had to write that in. Like it was like, oh, he can't be brought back to life because Gort did it. It has to be like, oh, it's the celestial being or whatever. Like Robert Wise hated that they did that rewrite, but they're like, look, we're not going to get the money to make this movie unless we put some stuff in here about God, because this is looking like the Space Congress is coming to judge us, and it's like, what about God? Where does Jesus fit into this? It's like, because now it's like they make science fiction movies and they're proudly like atheists, but back then you had to walk the line.
Oh yeah.
In this movie, you didn't.
No. Then we have Levitt. Levitt's like exposing Andromeda Strain to like different environments to see if it's like where it has growth or no growth.
I just see one of them said like chocolate.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was weird like things they were being exposed to.
And then she gets weird and just starts staring. And I wrote, is she infected or something? But no, she has some epilepsy that comes about because of red light, and because when the computer saw that there's no growth on the thing, it flapped a big red light that said like no growth or something like that, and then she didn't see it because she went into an epileptic fit for just a mere second or whatever.
No, she was down for like 10 minutes, because when she came back to, they're like, oh,
she looks at the clock.
Is that why they have to put the warnings on video games and movies now? Can that really happen to people?
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know that.
It's not everybody has like a
full on like foaming at the mouth seizure. But
yeah, not like how they're depicted in movies. Some people do, and then some people it's just it's not good. But yeah, they have to avoid it. I mean, there's some medicines and stuff you can do it. There's also a ketogenic diet will also help that, because some people they'll do a ketogenic diet.
Epilepsy's horrible. I know one guy that like he couldn't drive. He was a truck driver. Can't drive a truck once they diagnosed you with epilepsy. I think he's on disability. Like I think there's a lot of shit he couldn't do because he just fall out. It's like, what can you do? You work at a wellhead? I mean, it's not much.
Yeah, there was a podcast I used to listen to, it was a video game podcast, and one of the guys has epilepsy, and he used to have to talk about it. And yeah, it's like it's hard for him because almost every video game like has something that can induce a seizure in it. But for him, it wasn't like oh, it flashed wrong and now I'm on the floor foaming at the mouth. It would just like. But it would fuck up his day for sure. But there was things.
God, I don't have to deal with that.
But yeah, he had medicine he could take, and if he like stuck on his diet, it would help with that. And so it'd just be kind of like, I don't want to say like it just turned into a headache. I don't know, but that's like probably the best I can correlate to like a person that doesn't have that. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So I wrote something's wrong with Levitt, and I write this as being the end of Act 2. It's because the next one is just titles, fourth day. It's like, all right, that's another act then. Because really, there's no like. Usually, there's a thing like Act 2 is like when like the hero's at their lowest moment, and at this moment, there hasn't really been any kind of like huge action scenes or things like that, and there's no really.
No.
The heroes at their lowest moment, so I'm just like, this will work, whatever. We have Hall's like figuring out that acidosis can slow the growth of Andromeda. They actually go to they have like they're like in a little meeting, and there's like a typewriter there, and they like send out a message to the base. It's like, hey, we should get this called something, and it sends back an Andromeda strain. It's like, all right. And then Hall's like looking over the other messages that have been printed out on here, and then he notices that like, hey, they didn't bomb the town. And so this is when they figure out that there's been a communication error, and this is also they learn that the plane crash.
Now, what caused the communication error? Because there was a whole bunch of exposition about this, like 30 minutes ago in the movie. It's like, what's this about? Where they're talking about how the piece of paper fell between the clapper and the bell.
Yeah.
So messages would come through, but the bell couldn't go off. So
yeah,
no
the bell. Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Which seems like a very corporate problem. Like they told a guy, pay attention if the bell rings. Because the bell didn't ring, he didn't pay attention.
Yeah. He was looking at Playboy.
But it also meant that fucking thing was printing off messages the whole time. That dude wasn't doing shit. He could have went over there and looked at it the entire time.
Yeah, hey, if you're working at like a secret bioweapons research facility, maybe just, and this is your job because you clearly say everything's automated. It's like, well, what are you doing with all your time? I mean, because you're probably like on like some kind of duty rotation where you're there 24 hours a day for a certain length of time, and then the B crew comes in or whatever. So it's like, what the hell are you doing? You can only play cards so much.
And he was probably psychoanalyzed, so they'd make sure that these kinds of problems wouldn't happen. But apparently, they just let him through that day.
Yeah, this is the one automaton who got through. Who's like, no bell, no work. This guy just slipped past their psyche valve, but you wouldn't even need to give a psyche valve. Just give him an IQ test. He's got a room temperature IQ. It's like, hey, let's not leave this guy in charge of like the most important thing. But it's a movie.
But they need a dilemma because you have all these people being professional and like figuring out the problems, which you never do because like you just always have people get emotional and that creates the problem. Like the problem isn't the problem. The problem is how people don't do well with the problem. And so here everyone's being professional, so you have to create a problem that's somewhat plausible that they're not in control of. So that's fine. But
it's kind of fun. It's like, I bet you that really happened.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Sure, we almost launched nuclear weapons once because that happened.
Yeah.
Probably it's like a Tom Clancy thing. Like, oh, I heard this story. I'm going to retell it in a way where I can like have deniability, but if this is really what it's based on, this might have been one of those deals.
So yeah, the scientists are like shaving off samples of the Andromeda strain. They pin it under like a even further electron microscope or something.
Even bigger electron microscope.
And this is where they figure out that the Andromeda strain is a crystal life form that can exist in outer space. So it doesn't have like DNA or other stuff to it. So it
just has made of very simple compounds.
Yeah.
It's not even as compound or as complex as like a human cell.
Well, they compare it to like they say it's like a reactor, so it just like takes in stuff and then like makes fuel out of it and then grows and stuff like that. This is where they figured out like, oh yeah, don't drop a bomb on there or it will make Andromeda grow huge.
Yeah, don't drop a nuclear bomb on it specifically because they found out all the components of like nuclear material, like hydrogen and all these things. Like, oh, it grows faster in that environment.
Yeah.
So if you drop a nuke on it, then you're in trouble.
And then also then you're like, oh yeah, we need to disarm the bomb in the facility. It's like, yeah, we'll get on that.
Yeah, we'll send some guys in, sometime.
Well, I mean, they just need Hall to turn the key, but on level 5, there's conveniently no substation.
Yeah.
Just some wires hanging out of the wall. um, and we have the team like are arguing about like because they learned that the Wildfire Project is really meant for developing bioweapons rather than fight against them. So, because they see like they see like
because they see like
game.
a regular political map of the United States,
yeah,
and then on the opposite screen, it's like designed into zones or whatever. And what's his name, Doctor?
I think it's Dutton.
Yeah, Dr. Dutton immediately recognized, like, that's a biowarfare map. Why would you have that? Which leads to accusations against Stone and recriminations. And he's like, I didn't know. And but it's like another kind of, it's like, I know they have to move the plot in this direction because, again, we have this paranoia that permeates this movie. But it's also kind of silly. It's like, of course they'd have biowarfare maps if they're trying to stop it. If the ostensible purpose of this facility is to stop enemies from attacking with biological weapons and defeating them, you would use the references that the military does because those are all based on wind patterns, water, and everything. You ever seen a biowarfare map?
No.
Yeah, they are weird looking because they're based more on which way the wind blows, geographical features, rivers and stuff. It's like, yeah, this is how like biological chemical agents would spread, if used in this area.
Huh.
Ones I've seen are from the 70s. I don't know if they're like that. I saw them in a book.
I think we have kind of like we have a cut, and I think it's time has gone by because then we have the contamination alarm goes off, a seal broken autopsy, and Dr. Dutton is stuck in there.
Yeah.
There's also we have Levitt has a seizure because there's a red blinking light because the alarm are going off because contamination is going outbreak. So they have Dutton on a teleconference. He's still alive. They're like pumping oxygen in the room to try to fight Andromeda. This is also really mentioned that all the seals are polychron, but they don't know that's what it's feeding on at the moment. And then Hall starts putting stuff together, and he figures that like fast breathing can fight Andromeda because because that's what the baby's colicking and it's crying, and that's how it was able to fight Andromeda because it's creating like inopportune pH levels in the patients.
Yeah.
Because that's what I figured, like, because the baby's like pH level is like negative or whatever, and the other guy's is positive or however it goes, and so that's where they figure out like, oh, Andromeda can only really live in this certain pH balance. So if you're on either side of it, you're good, and so this is where Hall's like, hyperventilate, Dutton, you'll survive. And so yeah, they have him kind of like breathe heavy, although he's like no, I don't think that's gonna work, man. Because they're like, cut off the oxygen, hyperventilate. It's like, that sounds like a really bad idea at face value, man.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not an experiment,
And so Andromeda starts eating all the polychron gaskets, and Hall and Stone get locked on level 5. Hall like hops into the patient room and has the lady cut him out of the suit so he can get to like there's a hatch in there to like the center like thing of the base.
Most expensive prop in the movie.
You
hear about how they built that set?
Yeah, they had to like dig a hole in the ground to like make it like.
Well, the actual set is 3 stories tall, but then they dug a hole like 80 feet into the ground so they could shoot from below, so it looked like really huge, and it was like it was one of the most expensive sets they'd ever built on that lot at that time.
And still like they still had to extend it with a matte painting, but yeah, it looked good.
Yeah,
like, most of it was real, so you didn't notice. It looked huge. So yeah, it's just a tubular hallway, and there's a bunch of ladders all over the place. The room starts filling with gas. There's also like lasers in there that are supposed to like shoot vermin that would get inside the base somehow, and other stuff.
Escape lab animals.
I
like that clock on the wall. When
the one
computer detects like the virus, it's like it immediately spins around, and then part of it turns red, and it's like 5 minutes till detonate.
Which I don't know is that real or is that just an effect? Because I want
like an effect.
because I want a clock like that.
Yeah, I do too. I've always wanted one of those that just suddenly swing around, and it's very like alien Nostromo countdown going on.
So yeah,
a little good point of detail though is when Dr. Hall's climbing into the central shaft and he opens up. You see, like all the seals are just dust; they just fall to the floor.
Yeah.
I don't know if you noticed that. It's like, oh, they were actually like they thought that one out.
So yeah, the laser starts shooting at him. They have Stone is on the radio trying to direct him, that because he has like kind of a readout that when the laser's pointing at him, he's like, duck, and he's like on a ladder and he like moves to the left, and it's like those don't correlate whatsoever, but whatever.
Yeah, that's not ducking. Duck means move to the left. Okay.
And then eventually he does get like hit in the face with the laser.
Yeah,
and those are real green lasers they were using, so they had to be like really careful. It's like, this will blind you.
Yeah.
I wouldn't shoot a hole in your face, but it will blind you if it gets in your eye. So, and so yeah, he gets shot in the face and then he becomes extremely disoriented. And
he shot in the hand too, doesn't he?
Yeah. But it's most noticeable on his face because they keep putting it on screen. It's like the weird hole in his cheek suddenly 3 times bigger than it was before. Which could be real, but also, that's what a makeup prosthetic, whatever. It was 10 years away from the Thing, so yeah. They didn't have inflatable bladders and really thin latex you could apply. So. At least not stuff that wouldn't like kill you or something.
Yeah,
whatever weird, awful chemical makeup they were using at that time.
Yeah, like glue that was based on cyanide or something.
So he finally gets to he has to like. He has to go to one level, but then they can't go in there because it's locked for some reason. So he gets to like another level.
Oh, because the seals are already broken in that level.
Yeah. And he gets to the level. There's like a frightened lady in there. So she thinks she's frightened because she thinks like the virus is loose and is gonna kill her. Which it kind of is.
Yeah, but it's not like attacking people at the moment.
Nah, yeah, because it seemed to have. It's in its inert, like just getting plastic phase, not killing people phase. So yeah, he gets to it just in time and he shuts it off with like 9 seconds to go and then he passes out. So the day is saved. And then they talk about, there's kind of this overview. It's like I think it's literally like a voiceover and some graphics, and it's like a non-lethal Andromeda drifts out into the ocean and they see clouds with silver iodide, so it pulls Andromeda into the ocean where the alkaline seed would kill it. And then you have Stone giving a report to like the Senate committee, and they kind of leave things on like, hey, what if something worse happens? Like, what are we going to do about it? He's like, exactly, Senator. And they just kind of leave it there.
Yeah.
It's like, it could be worse. We've met the worst thing. And like, it could get even worse. And then they have like a display of a computer saying like, and it has like a computer simulation that predicts like a more lethal Andromeda, before that program, the simulation like overloads the computer and the program ends.
Yeah.
And that's how the movie ends, on fear.
Yeah. Paranoia and fear. That's what makes this, it's one of the elements of this movie that's cool. Now let's see, logical fallacies. Why did two strains of why did 2 strains of Andromeda in 2 separate places mutate the same way? I was like, well, okay. Is that part of its life cycle? We don't know.
There is. So have you ever seen the A&E TV remake of the 2008 remake?
Yeah, I just tried to watch it.
Yeah, it's awful.
Started off kind of cool, and then it just took a sharp turn into Dumbtown.
I remembered it like when I first watched it when it aired. I was like, I remember liking the first episode, and they came really stupid in the second one. And then I did a scrub rewatch for this, and I was like, no, it's all dumb. Yeah. There's not really redeeming thing about it. I mean, I know there's like a thing with actors. It's like, yeah, this is like all about methodology and like the people working together to solve a problem that isn't emotional. And like you can't give an actor that and like be satisfied. So you have to give everyone emotional stuff. And yeah, the 2008 Andromeda Strain is just like it's way too emotional and stupid.
And it almost has nothing. Well, the thing is like at the end of the day, this is a simple story in this movie. As this
Yeah.
is kind of this movie has like a beginning, a middle, and end, and a people working together to solve a problem. We all know this story. The problem with that TV series is they just tried to make it weird.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, the Andromeda strain is like, oh, it's not just some mindless bioorganism. It's something that, like, if manipulated right, gives people superhuman abilities and immortality and all this. And it's like, what? What are we doing?
No, that's not that. You might be thinking of Helix,
Oh,
which I
well,
like
think
Helix.
that's the Andromeda strain too. Weren't they playing
No,
around with it?
well, that could have been something. I think the stupidest thing with the Andromeda Strain, or maybe I don't know, it could be almost interesting, but because the rest of it was stupid, it's not stupid. And the Andromeda Strain, they find a message literally written on the Andromeda Strain,
Yeah.
and
Yeah,
it and they figure out that like, oh, the Andromeda Strain was sent back in time,
yeah.
presumably from humans, so we could solve the future's problem. Which that's nowhere in the original material.
No.
And that's where they also have something where like that's also somewhere in the explanation is that's where they talk about how like the two different Andromeda strains can communicate with each other and so that they have that in the new one. So yeah, they had that one thing, logical fallacy they fixed, and they created tons more dumb shit. They try to make it more like X-Files and stuff, and people are fighting against each other. It's like, hey man, this isn't necessary. You're all professionals and scientists. Like,
Yeah, you wouldn't do this.
oh man, they have I mean, I guess like they make it more dramatic when they have to get him to shut off the nuclear bomb, because they have like a military guy in there who's like a part of it, and he's like the one man theory guy. And it takes a key card and a thumbprint, and so like they're climbing the thing, but it's falling apart because it's eating up the plastic. He like falls into the nuclear reactor water that and dies, but as he dies, he's able to throw up his key card. Or no, he gets it there before he falls and dies. But they need his thumb, so another guy goes in there and gets in the nuclear reactor water, cuts his thumb off, and magically throws it up the shaft that's disintegrating, and he gets the thumb. It's more dramatic and it's way more stupid.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, you've taken me out of the mood.
And it has like the cast in this movie like kind of unknowns, and like so I can say like the 2008 version, it's a better cast movie because it's people you know, but it doesn't they don't fix it.
Yeah,
and it was produced by Tony Scott and Ridley Scott, but
yeah,
no. And the special effects all look very bad by nowadays. And there was a weird, like, kind of anti-war stuff in it because, you know, it's 2008, so the Iraq invasion. There's stuff in there where it's like, it's not wrong because, like, they aren't wrong, but it's still embarrassing.
Yeah.
The way they deal with it. So, and they may have a reporter who's, like, trying to get the truth out. And, like, yeah, it's super stupid.
Huh.
But yeah, I think I don't think there's any other versions of the Andromeda strain out there. But like I said, there was a sci-fi show called Helix, which I felt was like kind of in that vein, which I really liked the first season, but it does get really stupid, and there's a lot of like Illuminati and superhuman stuff where it's like basically making them immortal. Like, yeah, it'll kill the world, but it'll also make you immortal. It's like, okay. But I remember like the first like 2 or 3 episodes of that show was like, oh, this is amazing. And then it's like the budget kicks in or the budget drops out, and then they kind of, it doesn't really stick the landing. Season 2 seemed interesting, but I never watched it. They basically made it like, what if Andromeda strain met like the Wicker Man?
Jesus Christ.
Because like the guy's like tracing down the virus, and they end up in some weird town where there's like just some religious cult going on, and like everybody's farming some weird stuff, and like it all. But yeah, they only had 2 seasons of Helix, so.
Yeah, but I'd have to say overall, this is my favorite Michael Crichton movie adaptation.
Okay.
Even though there's some that are more exciting.
Yeah.
But I always like Michael Crichton books.
Yeah. I mean, it's like he's very didactic, but I like that because it's like he explains everything. It's like, oh, this is almost real. Here's all the explanation. It's detailed enough. It's like, I can believe this, even if it's complete horseshit. I can believe it. Because like, I mean, people always make that thing where it's like, it's just a bunch of techno babble. It's like, well, yeah, if you don't understand anything, it is a bunch of techno babble. It's not techno babble. It's just babble. It's just words being thrown at you. Which they do that in Star Trek all the time too. But like, you get used to it, or you learn some cool stuff about science, and you start to like, okay, I see where this attaches to science and then becomes science fiction, but it is based on something. So,
yeah, I mean, Michael Crichton was good at like emerging science novels.
Yeah.
It's like we're not here yet, but we could be given, a few leaps, and that's like Jurassic Park was like that. And he's also a really clever writer.
Yeah.
Again, it's kind of like, we talked about Arthur Miller. It's like, yeah, here's a guy who went to Harvard to be a doctor, got a degree, and decided, I'm going to write books. He's also kind of a sad character, personally, in his personal life. He felt very isolated from others because he was as tall as a professional basketball player. It bothered him. Actually, his height bothered him because he felt like he never fit in.
Yeah, I always felt
7 feet tall is a weird height, man. It's like, where do you buy clothes?
I always feel like that Hollywood should not they shouldn't be looking for people like graduating from USC, top of their class. They should be looking for med students that are about to drop out of school.
Yeah.
Because they're really creative.
From Harvard. He just never got.
Oh, he did? Okay.
He never wanted to practice medicine. He's like, yeah, this isn't for me. I'm going to do books. But he likes. I think he learned a lot about the scientific method becoming a doctor, and that's reflected in his books.
Well, it's like what's the Mad Max guy?
Arthur Miller.
Was it Arthur Miller? Okay.
I thought it was Arthur Miller. I could be wrong.
I
always say Arthur Miller. I know that's wrong now.
Well, I was like, is that the guy? Is that the actor from this movie? Or am I thinking some? Oh, Arthur Hill's the actor in this. Okay, never mind.
George Miller.
Okay.
Yeah.
Arthur Miller's somebody too. Who's Arthur Miller? Oh, yeah, George Miller. Okay. George Miller. Yeah, he was also. Well, I'm not sure he was a med school dropout. I think he got through it and decided like, oh, this.
Well, he was a doctor. Yeah,
he's just like
in emergency rooms in Australia.
Yeah, and he's like, oh yeah, this absolutely isn't for me. But
yeah,
when you go through that kind of school, like the kind of stuff you have to learn is like, and like how you can't just have casual knowledge of it. You have to have intimate knowledge of all this stuff. Because you can't just like, oh, cool, I learned all the anatomy of the body. You also have to like, I'm using an MRI machine. I got to know how that shit works. So you got to study everything all the time. And then if you're taken out of that kind of high pressure environment, it's like, here's movies. And you're like, oh, this isn't that complicated. It just kind of takes structure.
So I can be a doctor and work 12 hours a day and then be paged the other 12 and get phone calls all the time, or I can write 8 hours a day.
Although there's a funny thing in the behind the scenes thing that they're talking to Michael Crichton, this because he did kind of like get into movies after he directed Westworld and I can't remember if it was a Coma or something, like I can't remember the other one we watched, and he saw like he was talking about how like he's watched Robert Wise, and like you have all these people putting this film together, and like he'd coordinate them and he'd call action, then suddenly everybody's more moving towards one goal, and he's like, oh, they actually listen to him. And he's like talking about how like in the medical field, like the only way you can get people to listen to you if their life is threatened by disease, death. So he was like, "Oh, that kind of control, I'd like that." So it might be why he started directing movies for a bit.
Yeah. Yeah, he did some cool. The Westworld was a cool movie for its time. Yeah, I always liked Michael Crichton.
Yeah,
I always read all his books. I always enjoyed them. Um, and he died like suddenly of cancer, I think. Well, not suddenly. He just didn't talk about it. And then when he died, he was like, "Oh yeah, Michael Crichton died. He had cancer, but he didn't. He didn't. He wasn't a public person outside of his work.
yeah.
He didn't want to be bothered by people. He was married like 6 times, I think. Too, so probably a challenging person to know. But yeah, that's the Andromeda strain, folks. Does not
Catch it and die.
Yeah, only holds like a 60% like aggregate review score. Um, a lot of people find the movie tedious.
Yeah, yeah. I
Over
read a Roger Ebert review of it, and although he was more glowing, he got 3 stars out of 4. And yeah, he was saying like, but he was saying like, he was actually complimenting it and how it looked like 2001. And there's like comments below it where it's like basically doing the exact opposite. It's like, no, because they're aping Stanley Kubrick, it's bad and wrong. And there's too much techno babble and not enough like emotion to get involved with this. It's like, yeah, I understand people who say that, but I just never believe them.
Yeah, like I said, it's one of my favorite movies. I love this movie. I'll watch it, and probably because it is calm, and there's like crazy stuff going on, but everyone's being pretty smart until
Yeah.
it just starts to fall apart.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we got to spring into action now. But I think one thing I like about this movie is like the lack of, there's no sex, there's no like weird tension. It's kind of personalities that are challenging, but like, oh, I understand all these people and I believe them as characters.
And it's a movie about methodology. It's like, here's the problem, how do we solve it?
Yeah.
Whereas like that's what I hate about dramas. Like, here's the problem, like, how do we solve it? It's like by creating more drama unnecessarily.
By crying. We're going to get through this with tears and rage. It's like, well, we're just trying to build a castle. No.
What if I killed my father? It's like, what if he wasn't your father? Oh no, I have to kill my mother now.
Yeah, it's like a Doors song. It's like, what are we doing?
Which is like, like why I like the movie like The Martian, because it's not about like people versus people. It's like, here's a dilemma, everyone's trying to solve it, and like, it's not without it's fraught with setbacks and like, emotions, like, but it's not stupid.
Yeah. Well, it's like Apollo 13 too, like that. The movie that really happened, but the movie was like, yeah, these were all people and they were facing a terrible problem that actually had dimensions. Because we didn't know much about Apollo 13 until the movie came out. It's like, oh, these guys could have died at 100 points along the way. Like just the guy like, oh, time to stir the tank. And it's like, yeah, we're going to blow up a tank of liquid oxygen. Like that could have killed them. This whole thing could have just exploded right then. And then then they can't filter the CO2 or whatever. But it's like, but it was people like thinking through the problem. It wasn't like, let's panic. Let's get out the rosary beads and make those last phone calls home. It's like, no. Let's not give in to death right away. Let's think about it a little bit.
Yeah, so that's why I consider like, was it Star, or what's the one where they have to drive the giant bomb into the sun?
Sunshine.
Yeah, Sunshine. It's like half a good movie because half of it's like them just like trying to figure out like, how are we gonna do this, and then the other half's a stupid horror movie.
Yeah, it's like, God has done this to me and I'm going to like prevent everything. It's like, why would you do this?
And then you have somebody got sent all this way who's like a doctor, and then like, because a guy kind of has a red face, she trips and falls and lets him kill her. And like Chris Evans, the only character that makes sense that whole movie, because he should have died like 5 times, but he's the only one that like fought and thought his way out of every situation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like anything like that. It's half a good movie. Sunshine is definitely that, because that's a really cool movie. Like the whole concept is like, this is amazing. How can this go wrong? Oh, this is how. Okay, yeah, yeah. I hate
they,
God.
they
Like, oh, here we go.
they just made they both made the bad halves of Event Horizon.
Yeah, yeah. Event Horizon, another, not for the same reasons, but a great half a movie.
Yeah.
I mean, so is The Black Hole. It's a Disney film, another G-rated movie, kind of a similar era. It's like, it's half a great movie. But it would just descends into psycho again. It's like, oh, I have a PhD in physics from, whatever the biggest university in the world is, and I'm well regarded. It's like, but my mother was mean to me, so you're all gonna die. Or it's like, no, nobody does this. This is how the world works.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are out of your control. No matter what you do, you can't control it, but you can kind of control your emotions.
Yeah, and how you react to things.
Yeah.
It's a problem I have with a lot of like TV and movies. Like, have you seen this? It's like, yeah, I don't remember it because it just.
Oh yeah. Well, it's mostly like I say I don't like dramas, even though they're like, oh, this is an Oscar-winning movie. It's like, yeah, but they're usually stupid. It takes a lot for me to actually watch like someone telling me like this is a good drama, and like me actually getting to watch it and prove that it's like, oh, is this actually a good movie and not just infuriatingly stupid?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of this. I have similar views. Sometimes I'll go with it if it's well done, but
yeah. Sometimes it's undeniable. It's like, and even sometimes it can still be stupid, but it's like, that performance is really good. Can't deny that.
I'm not helping the show out as I'm sitting here and trying to think of an example and coming up zero. But it's like, yeah, I'm sure there's some movies that I would that I have watched and enjoyed.
Well, I'm just. It's mostly just like like the Oscar winning, because like Titanic is like, oh, this has got to be stupid, and it is, but it's still like a good movie. I had to eventually come around and say it was a good movie. But
Yeah.
it's still stupid.
Yeah, it's like, I'm not, just like my favorite movie, like Blade Runner. It's like, yeah, that's kind of methodical, and people are doing random crazy stuff, but then you realize, oh, well, yeah, they've got like 4 years to live, and they got to cram all these experiences into 4 years. And they're also super intelligent, like humanoid clones. And it's like, yeah, they got to cram all this stuff in there. Yeah. So there's like, of course, they're acting nuts. And Deckard's just an alcoholic who's been.
That's also not a world we live in. So whatever they do, you can understand. Like,
yeah,
all right, yeah. I don't live there, man. I don't know how crazy it is.
Yeah, maybe the
sky's on fire, man.
Yeah, so it's yeah, but this one's worth a watch.
Yeah,
I mean, it is dated by today's standards, but it's still kind of, but it's also dated like there's a lot of that, that retro futurism stuff that they do. It's like, oh, there's so much of that you could pull out of this.
Yeah,
it's like, I love those, like, multicolored corridors and weird CRT displays and stuff, and it's like, oh, that's kind of cool.
I haven't watched Severance yet.
Huh?
I haven't watched Severance yet. Sometimes I see shots of that kind of remind me of this in almost a weird way.
Yeah. Well, this is a style of movie making that was around with that.
Well, I mean, like we said, there is a resemblance to 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Where things have purpose and very, monotone colors that are very contrasty and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I do kind of like that. I don't know if I'd want to live in that, but I think it looks cool in a movie.
Anyways, if you liked what you heard, you can find us at anchor.fm/Verhoeven Effect, or you can go to verhoeveneffect.com. Takes the same place. You can rate our podcast whatever you want. You can rate us whatever you want, but the only thing the algorithm listens to is the highest rating. So remember, you control the algorithm. We also have listener support at verhoeveneffect.com, or you can support the podcast, a monthly stipend of 99 cents, 49 or $9.99. You can find us at Twitter at Verhoeven Effect, Facebook Verhoeven Effect. You can also find us on YouTube at American Greed Factory. You watch both this live and that show live and unedited. And we also have t-shirts at belowthecollar.com/Greed Factory. So for the Verhoeven Effect podcast, I'm Colin.
And I'm Nathan.
Goodbye, America.